The following program is made possible by Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
The first contested district race for the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors has come down to two candidates, and they're here with us. The game is politics. The game is on. Welcome to the game. I'm Mark Simon. Incumbent Adrienne Tissier is leaving the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors after 12 years, vacating her North County seat due to term limits. And for the first time in San Mateo County since the implementation of district elections, we have a contested race for an open seat. Joining us today are the two top vote getters from the June primary, two colleagues from the Daly City Council, David Canepa, who got the most votes in June, and Mike Guingona, who finished second by a significant margin. Thank you both for joining us. It's great to have you back for another round of this. Mike, let's start with you. Tell us briefly a little bit about yourself, your background, your experience in public life, your profession.
Well, I was born in San Francisco, raised in Daly City. I'm a single-parent mother in Daly City. Went to local schools, got out to Skyline College. When I got to Skyline College, did a couple years as a wrestler, was a jock for a while. Got to UCLA, got my degree in history, and came back and got a law degree at USF, became a public defender. About a year into my public defender work, 1991, I decided I wanted to run for the Daly City Council because I had seen that Daly City had changed. It had been a very large population, but the leadership had not changed with it. And so for many, many years, a Filipino had run for the City Council and had not won, 20 years. So in 1992, I ran. I lost in 92. In 93, I was able to win, and I've been able to have, what, 6 elections since then. My family life is I'm a teacher and a coach at Reardon High School. I still have my law practice, which is what I do to pay the bills. Like I said, I'm a father for a 17-year-old son that's going to college hopefully next year, and have a wife, and I've worked on the City Council for all those years. And that's why I'm running for the Board of Supervisors, because of my community involvement.
David.
I'm a proud fourth generation San Mateo County resident, born at Seton Hospital. Like Mike, I went to junior college at Skyline, got my administrative degree in criminal justice, and then from there, I've always had a passion for public service. So I went to the University of San Francisco, where I graduated with a degree in politics. My background is was in state and local government, had the opportunity to serve on regional boards throughout the county. So I served on the Transportation Authority, where I was vice chair, elected unanimously to the Bay Area Air Quality Management District Board, where I've served. Also had the opportunity to be mayor of Daly City in 2014, and I've served 8 years. The reason I'm running...
we'll get to that at the end of the show. Let's talk about some of the issues that are on people's minds, starting with housing. Everybody knows housing prices are skyrocketing. It's making it very, very difficult for people to stay here, for people to continue to live here, for families to stay together here. What's your answer for the housing problem? Start with you, Dave.
So we know affordability is an issue, Mark. The last time I was on this show, I had talked about looking at an affordable housing bond, like they had done in Santa Clara. What we have now seen is that our elected family and people realize that there's an affordable housing issue. We're looking at a measure, we'll be talking about that, Measure K. To me, that is one of the solutions for housing. With the dissolution of redevelopment, having those extra dollars can create housing in those cities that deem it appropriate. In Daly City, we currently have affordable housing projects. We have a project that's coming online, Mid-Peninsula. We're going to add housing near transportation corridors. So affordability is an issue, and I think the way we address it is through the outlay of capital, working with different nonprofit providers, making sure that we don't create housing, but we create the services to go with the housing. And if elected, I'm committed to making sure that happens.
Mike.
I think my track record in Daly City kind of speaks for itself. For 23 years, we've been able to collaborate with nonprofit organizations such as Habitat for Humanity and Mid-Penn Housing to build affordable housing in Daly City. Another thing that we did in, I think it was 2007, we put together a housing exclusionary act, which basically meant that there was a 20% set aside for developers. When they build in Daly City, if you want to put 100 units in Daly City, then you got to make sure that 20% of them are set aside for affordability. And what we're able to do is we're able to deed restrict that. And in the years since 2007, we've been able to create 70 units of affordable housing forever, and up to $1 million for a housing endowment trust fund to be used to do things like this in issues like that. So I want to bring that experience to San Mateo County to be able to bring more affordable housing online.
Well, you make an interesting point, which is, you know, I don't want to diminish what any city has tried to do to build more affordable housing, but it's a small number when you really look at the size of the problem. Do you think we're going to be able to build our way out of this problem? Can we build enough housing? And if not, then what are we supposed to do, Mike?
You know, that's an interesting question. And being able to build our way out of it, with the housing jobs imbalance the way it is, and the way that other cities are coming up with more areas that there's employment centers, we don't have a lot of places where people are going to be able to live to go to those places. So what I would propose would be that if a developer was going to come in or a company was going to come in and create those kind of jobs, that they would also have to, at the same time, have an obligation to create housing for those workers. Because when you put something like that in a place, you have to determine how are they going to get there, where are they going to live, and things of that nature. So in order to look at that, I think that developers should take on more of an active role in that.
Doesn't that just discourage job growth?
I don't think so.
David?
I absolutely agree with you, Mark.
Well, that was a question, not an opinion.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think what we need to do, and that's why I've talked about Measure K earlier, we need to create inventory. And where do we create inventory? We create inventory through the Grand Boulevard Plan, and that goes from San Jose to Brisbane. We take blighted areas like we did in Daly City. We identify housing near transportation corridors. In San Mateo County, our unemployment rate is at about 3.2%. It's the lowest in the state. It's a great problem to have because we have people working. What we need to do is to create housing policies that make sense, but we also need the capital to make sure that those projects come to fruition. And I think dedicating dollars will help us accomplish that.
Do both of you support Measure K on the ballot?
Yes.
Now, the premise, David? Yeah, you do, yes?
Yes, of course,
okay,
yes.
I thought we ought to hear you.
Yes, yes.
The premise behind that is to use that money to build housing, but the Board of Supervisors has the authority to use it on anything, which is an interesting blank check, one might say. What else should Measure K be spent on? David?
Sure. When you look at Measure A, which came before Measure K has created, or Measure A has created so many great programs. Let me
interject. Measure A was passed by the voters.
Yep.
Measure K would extend it an additional 20 years.
That's correct. And so what Measure A did, Mark, was it created making sure that third graders can read, the big lift. It also created programs around public safety. What I would do with those dollars, and I mentioned on the campaign trail, is I would create a comprehensive program that be piloted where we can take students after school program and do what they've done in Cincinnati and create a community resource officer position, whether it's nutrition, whether it's health, whatever it is, but to give our kids the opportunity so they have the resources to be successful.
Okay. Mike, we're going to take a quick break. We'll give you a chance to answer that question after the break. But you guys stick around, and you stick around too. We'll be right back.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
I'm Mark Simon. We have two candidates running for District 5 seat of the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors, Mike Guingona and David Canepa, both colleagues on the Daly City Council. We're talking about Measure K, which is a 20-year extension of Measure A, the half-cent sales tax that was approved by the voters, a general tax so the Board of Supervisors can spend it any way they want to. Now, the plan is to spend a lot of it on trying to help solve the housing problem, but you can spend the money on other things. What else should we spend it on?
You know, this is very reminiscent of a reauthorization that you and I were part of back in 2009. The reauthorization of Measure A, the transportation one, was one that we had to go around and convince people in the district that it was something that was in their best interest. You know, the reauthorization of this Measure A through Measure K is just an extension of what I believe we're going to be having to look at, and that is those kinds of housing issues that the Board of Supervisors has thought are the most important. Now, what I would do in the way of being able to explain how important Measure K is to be able to say that those issues that we could take on after speaking about after housing. Yeah, after housing would be to be able to extend to the Big Lift. I've spoken to Carol Groom. I actually went to the Big Lift event in San Mateo County, and I was just amazed by all the great work that the Big Lift did. So I would be putting a lot of the money back into education like that. You know, I started an after-school program at Terra Nova, the Coastside Grappler, so I was able to work with the school district to provide that service to kids. So I think it's really important to be able to extend it to kids and families.
Let me interject here. I work for the San Mateo County Transit District, which includes the Transportation Authority, SamTrans, and Caltrain. We get money now, $5 million a year from the county for our paratransit program. Should more of that money go to transit? Don't feel like you have to say yes just because you're on my show. David.
Sure. Transit's very, very important. We're dealing with the issues in San Mateo County around how we're going to create more throughput. Highway 101 is it go from 8 lanes to 10 lanes. We talk specifically about electrification. How do we do that? How do we make sure that that system is efficient? I think the other thing that we need to look at is vitally important is how do we expand our shuttle service? So taking people from that last half mile, that last loop, to get them to work, to get them to their neighborhoods. The way we do that is we invest our resources. And so I think an investment, $5 million, $10 million, whatever it takes, we see the congestion. We need a solution to address that congestion, Mark.
Yeah. Mike?
You know, Mark, I served for 11 years on SamTrans, and I chaired it. I served for 9 years on the Transportation Authority, and I chaired it. So my positions on transportation have always been to protect what's happening in the 5th District. The 5th District is the most transit-dependent district in San Mateo County. And I actually rode the bus. I rode the 20J to Skyline College when I was growing up. So it's very important to me to make sure that the most transit-dependent area in San Mateo County gets the services. You know, we used to have arguments all the time about fare box recovery. Yeah. Fare box recovery versus service. And
fare box recovery being the amount of money we get back at the fare box versus how much we spend to run the service.
And you know, with working with Jerry Ha and his before him, and working with people in SamTrans, I tried to come up with a solution where we could look at fare box recovery, but at the same time be aware of the needs of those people that need that service. I could be real specific. In Pacifica, you remember when they were thinking about cutting the Lindemar service. And I believe there were 5 people that came to the meeting and said, we need this service. And there was a big discussion on the board as to, are we doing this for 5 people? And I think what we turned out is we determined that we needed to keep that service, not just for those 5 people, but for everybody else.
We talked a little bit about housing. The other side of that equation is rent control. 2 ballot measures on the ballot in San Mateo County and Burlingame and San Mateo, very controversial. Big editorial in the recent edition of the Daily Journal, full-page editorial, never seen before, opposing both of them. Do you support either one of those measures? Mike? You
know, it's interesting to note that I looked at both of those measures at the time when the San Mateo County Democratic Party was taking a look at them. I understand that rent control is something that in San Mateo County has not taken foot. I think that it's something that really needs to be looked at. I know that my opponent can't be for any one of these measures because he's supported both by SAMCAR and the California Apartment Owners Association. So there's no way he could look at this, and there's no way he could be objective about this kind of an issue. So for me, I don't, as far as San Mateo and those jurisdictions are concerned, what's good for them is good for them. Would I be for it if it was something that was in my jurisdiction? I'd have to also take a look at it. But I think I could support it if it alleviated those kinds of anecdotal problems that I've heard, and that is people that are getting their rent raised $200–300. I don't mind the 1% floor and the 4% ceiling. I don't mind the exemption of single-family homes and the older apartment buildings. It's something to look at, and do I think it is a trend that's going to move forward? I don't know, but I know that when there's a lot of renters in an area.
Let me ask you this: is it a trend you think should move forward? I mean, you sound like you're saying you support rent control.
Unless we can
catch
up,
two measures.
Well, unless we can catch up with this housing stock, I think that the demand side solutions and the market. I think that to determine whether the market's going to be able to correct itself, I think that these two measures need to be looked at, and I think that they should be able to be determining what's going on down there.
Right, but do you think rent control? Let's assume
rent stabilization.
You think there should be some measure of rent stabilization? Because some people are really getting killed by these rent increases.
I think in this situation, after looking at it, I think it's something I could actually be for.
Okay, David.
God, his position's evolved, Mark. You know, before we went from Sam Carr, he was against rent control. Then we went before another labor group. He said he's for rent control. Now he's here. You've had to prod him on where he's at. Let me be very clear. I'm against rent control, and let me tell you why. It's not because the apartment association or the realtors support it, because I think it's a flawed way to deal with housing. Let me give you two examples. In Manhattan and San Francisco, if rent control was the panacea and is the answer, then why is the highest rents in the United States in both of those cities? I believe we have people who live on fixed incomes in San Mateo County. Those people live in District 5, Mike, and I've talked with them. Some of those people rely on rent, that rental income. And so my opponent now says he supports rent stabilization. Now he's saying he doesn't support rent control. It's confounding. It's confusing. But let me be very clear. My position all the way throughout the council in 8 years. Mike's position, and he'll admit that, his position for the last 20 years was that he didn't support rent control. So he supports rent stabilization. I believe that we should create affordable housing. I talked about the bond, and Measure K is going to help us with the inventory and making sure that we can have people live in our county.
Okay, we're going to come back to this. We have to take a break, but trust me, we'll come back to this.
Very briefly, yes.
I think you better stick around. We'll be right back.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
After the game, we're talking to Mike Guingona and Dave Canepa, and we were talking about rent control. Mike, I know you've been itching since the break to respond to the accusation that your position keeps changing.
Okay, let me just say this. So there's a lot of people that think that rent control is something that it's a slippery slope that's not going to happen in San Mateo County. I believe that we have problems. I believe that apartment owners and tenants should get together, and policymakers should get together to determine whether or not they can come up with ways to police themselves. Rent control, the only reason you put rent control out there is to make sure that things like, well, I've been walking precincts too, and I've been finding out that people in Daly City have been having their rents raised $200–300 at the end of a month. Am I looking for a way to stop that? Of course I am. Is rent control going to be the answer to that? I don't know, because we've never had to do it in Daly City. So when you ask me whether or not I would be for rent control, the answer is I would be for it if it would alleviate that kind of an issue. And the reason why I mentioned the specific things about the measures that are going on in South County are because I believe that when you exempt single-family homes, that the problem that he's talking about when he says he walks around and people are counting on that rent, that they're going to be exempt. That only apartments that are older apartments are going to be the ones that are going to be used for this. So there won't be a disincentive to building. So I looked at these things. I didn't just, it wasn't a knee-jerk reaction.
Well,
and when you asked me the question.
The way he put it was, you've been against rent control for 20 years, but your position keeps changing.
Well, it doesn't keep changing. I've only been asked about it this year.
Yeah.
Every year, that is the litmus test usually. It's, are you for rent control? Well, every year, those questions and those stories about rents that go up $200, $300, $400, they increase. And at a certain point, whether or not we're willing to talk about it, apartment owners and tenants and renters are going to have to get together to alleviate this problem, because clearly it's a problem from a renter side,
David,
and they just don't have enough political power.
I heard you say very clearly you're against rent control. I don't understand what you're going to do that makes it. We've all heard those stories. We've seen people get evicted. We know school teachers who are worried one more rent control, they have to leave the area. I haven't heard your solution for how am I going to help those people?
Mark, I've given it to you a couple of times throughout this presentation. What I've told you is we have to create more housing. And the way we're going to do it is by creating the inventory. I've laid out a plan. I've talked about from Daly City to Redwood City on using areas that are blighted areas and creating the housing. And the only way we're going to do that is because the state took the redevelopment dollars, is that we're going to create it through capital and getting hundreds of millions of dollars to do that, and we have to do that over a period of years. That's how we build the housing.
Well, okay, over a period of years, we all know 3 to 5 years from start to finish for a housing project. Yeah. What about somebody whose rent's going up a week from now, a month from now, 2 months from now?
Mark, I don't believe in rent control, and I don't know if you're trying to lead me to that. What I'm telling you is what I'm telling you.
You can tell him. What do you tell those people?
Mike, not what you've been telling people with your answer. That's not very clear.
Well, you've been telling them that you saved Seton Medical Center, David. So let's be honest about that. He said he passed a law, and that's the reason why Seton Medical Center is here. So we have him to thank for Seton Medical Center being here. Do you believe that, Mark? Well, I sure don't.
Mike, apparently you don't.
Can I answer that?
That's amazing.
Yes, you bet.
Mike, I certainly did. And we voted the legislation. It was a 5-0 vote.
It was a resolution to ask them to do something.
No, let me tell you.
It was a resolution to say, please don't close Seton Medical Center. It wasn't a resolution that bound anybody to anything.
Let him answer.
Mike, you voted for the resolution.
Absolutely,
it was a 5-0 resolution, and here's what the resolution did, Mike. We called for a full-service acute care hospital. And the reason we called for a full-service acute care hospital, and you voted for this, Mike, is because we were concerned about the elimination of the emergency room. There's 120,000 people in North San Mateo County. It's Daly City's largest employer that depend on that hospital. And for you to sit over there, Mr. Guingona, and say that I did nothing in terms of the legislation,
in terms of the legislation, you saved Seton.
In terms of legislation, what we did, Mike, and let me tell you, we worked with our community partners. We worked with.
Because I would have said we saved Seton.
We worked with CNA.
No, are you saying that your vote on that resolution was meaningless?
Absolutely not. I mean, but it was just like anything else. We didn't just write. He hasn't finished the story. Okay. So we didn't just do this resolution. Okay. So I wrote letters to the Attorney General, and I did something different. I looked at who was coming to buy Seton, Prime, and I was against it 100%. Me and another council member. And what we did is we showed up at a meeting that was held by the Attorney General, and we urged her not to do this sale. He, on the other hand, was on the other side, urging the Attorney General to accept the Prime sale. Well, we all know what happened. They turned Prime down, they took somebody else, and now that group is going to be doing a hospital for over 5 years. If we would have accepted the Prime deal that Mr. Canepa wanted, we would have only had the hospital for 5 years. And that's true.
He's absolutely right. He voted against the hospital, Mark. So when we had
I voted against Prime.
When we had the opportunity to vote for a full-service hospital, what he did was he voted against it. Okay. So let me tell you what he did. And he admitted he voted against the hospital.
No, I voted against Prime, the earlier sale. We all know who Prime is. And the Attorney General turned down the sale.
Let him finish his version of the event.
So let me tell you exactly what happened. We had the hospital come before us to be voted on. The Attorney General rejected it. Mr. Guingona said, I did not want Prime to take over. He's exactly right. I wanted to make sure that the hospital that we had was a full-service acute care. And at that time, I wasn't willing to put the hospital in jeopardy. And so what we ended up doing, Mark, and And Mr. Guingona and I were unanimous in this. We ended up supporting the other buyer. But for Mr. Guingona to stay up here and to suggest that I was against a hospital, it's not true, Mark. He was the one who voted against the initial hospital provider.
Mike.
Okay, so the inner dealings of this whole thing are as follows. Okay, so the California Nurses Association made a deal with Prime, and they said, keep us for a year, we'll support this sale. Unfortunately, SEIU, who represented everybody else, did not support the sale. Okay, that's how this really went down. And the other thing is that he's right. I spoke out against Prime, just like everybody else spoke out against Prime. If Prime would have come in and bought this hospital, in 5 years it would have been closed. So I think that what we did was reasonable, and it was justified by the Attorney General's opinion. The Attorney General said, if we would have okayed Prime, they would have closed this place down in 5 years. So in answer to the question, I supported the use of a better
Well, when you
buyer.
cast that vote, wasn't there the risk that there wouldn't be another buyer?
Yes.
So
there was a risk that there wouldn't be a buyer, but it wasn't a real risk because I had been in communication with the board members of the Daughters of Charity. There were other buyers. There were so many other offers on the table. We knew all about them.
We've got maybe 15 seconds for you to respond before we're done with this show, so you got to be brief.
Okay, I'll just clearly say this. I will never put our residents' lives in danger. I think what Mr. Guingona did was purely political, and when it came to making sure that a hospital was in place, I voted with our neighborhood, I voted with our patients, and I voted with our community, making sure we have a hospital there.
Mike Guingona, Dave Canepa, thank you for being with us today for such a lively discussion. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to vote on November 8th. You've been watching The Game. Join us next time when we do this again.